Hey guys, welcome to episode number 66 of the Game On Girlfriend podcast. So this was a really cool interview. I really enjoyed talking to today's guest. Her name is Dr. Megan Fisk. Yes, doctor. And it's so funny because we talk about PhDs and how if you don't look to research, don't get one. It's so great. And I was like, but you have one. She's awesome. She's down to earth. She's totally real. And what she is a public speaking coach. So she helps primarily teachers, coaches, and healers really get their message out through speaking in public. Because for so many of us now, especially, we're all so sick of the written ads. Like, can I get an amen on that one, right? No, thank you, please, right? We're done with that. We really want to connect with people. We want to know who they are. And she helps entrepreneurs do that. She was a college professor for 10 years. She knows what she's doing inside of communications, and she understands the structure of different talks, what they should sound like, how you should structure them. But most importantly, she actually teaches people how to communicate through those stories, because we've all heard people kind of get up and tell their stories like this. And then I went to, and it's like, dude, are you okay? Right? Like, she really helps people break through that. She works with both men and women, which I love. And in today's interview, you're going to hear us talk about the difference between the way that men and women communicate, which I loved. I thought that was really cool. I think that's really important for us to understand, because a lot of the time, public speaking has been designed to fit inside of a male-dominated world of speaking. So I love the way she talks about how we communicate differently, and wait until she tells you what actually matters when you're speaking. It's not what you think it is. All of that is inside today's episode. Plus, she's got a really cool offer for everybody watching. It's right underneath this video. Check it out. Go get it. I think it's really cool. And if you guys have been following me and you know the mission I'm on to like break up what every coach sounds like and to break up this BS that we all have to sound the same or look the same, all that stuff, what she's offering below this video will actually help you get that done. So please go get it. All right. So without further ado, let's get to it. Megan, welcome to the Game On Girlfriend podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you about stories today because, as you know, this one is near and dear to my heart, and I'm so excited to dive in with you about all the gooey goodness that has wrapped up inside of stories.
I love talking about stories. You know, how we live our lives, and the more aware we become of the stories in which we're living our lives by and we're consuming and the stories we're telling, the better everything gets. So I can't wait to dive in.
Truth, sister, truth. So you are a speech coach, right? Can you tell us a little bit of like, what does that mean? Like, how do you work with people? What happens?
Totally. I love this question because there's so many types of speech coaching when you get into it. So sometimes people are like, wait, do you work with like English as a second language? No, I do public speaking coaching. So I really started doing presentations when I was in church as a little kid. Like,
oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So I've been speaking since I was like maybe 10 years old in front of people. And then in high school, I did speech and debate. I competed nationally for Arizona State University on their debate team. And then I ended up getting a PhD in communication. So I've taught public speaking now all over the world for the last 10 years, which is, I say it now and I'm like,
I'm sorry, but that is like the sexiest thing ever. Do you just feel so cool when you say something like that?
I feel so cool saying it. For sure. When COVID happened, I moved back to the US from Europe. And so I'm always like, oh, it used to be so exciting, different country every month. But now I'm back in the US and in Atlanta and loving it. But I really got into public speaking coaching. You know, I was doing a lot as a professor. So part of my role, I finished my PhD in communication, and then I stayed at Arizona State University and worked out of both the president's office and the communications department. So I was doing public relations on behalf of the university a lot.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow, that must have been amazing. Like, talk about like the front lines. That's really cool.
Right. I know. And in so many ways, it was the dream job, Sarah. Like, but I was also 26 and like, wait, this is what I do for the next 30 years? Like, where do I go from here? What do I do?
Please. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I achieved every one of the benchmarks, you know? And it was just like And I've never enjoyed the research side of it. So in retrospect, and the advice I always give people that are like, I think I want to go back to grad school, Megan, is I'm like, don't do a PhD unless you love doing research. Whole
Good
other
call.
yeah, because you really don't need it. A master's degree, awesome, but PhD, anywho, we all make mistakes in our early 20s.
But a PhD is great. Listen, we all know there are people who have to get PhDs, but like for the rest, I totally hear what you're saying. I love that. You heard it here first, folks, that she just saved you like tens of thousands of dollars, by the way. Okay. And lots of hours of research if it's not your bag. That's amazing. So I know one of the things that you love to talk to people about, and I have to tell you, when I first heard you say this, like I was like, I love her, is that you talk about how men and women communicate differently. And I have been saying that for years. I've also been saying that I think we view the world differently. And I think we're also brought up through the world differently. And I'm sure that has to do with how we communicate differently. So I'd love to hear your take on that. Can you tell us what you mean by that? And what do you see specifically inside of speech that is so different between men and women?
Totally. And you hit the nail right on the head. Is part of it is how we're socialized. We're socializing little boys and little girls very differently, particularly, and I'll speak mostly from an American culture standpoint, but we bring them up differently. And then the other thing you said that's so key, and I want to really drive home, is that it's all in terms of the audience, right? Like when you're saying, oh, we're communicating differently, it's always because who we're communicating to matters much more than who we are. And so we're constantly adapting our communication, and that's what sets the great communicators apart from the not so great ones, is when you're not communicating to your audience. And so when we're talking about these gender differences between communication, it's much more about who is on the other side of that message and what you want to present to them. So if we talk from like the macro level, the differences between men and women in terms of communication from, and bring up all of the research perspective, they are really slight, but they're so important because how we're going about it really impacts our whole lives. So the main difference is this report talk versus rapport talk. And I know it sounds tricky, but men are all about reporting. So you ask a guy what they did today. 1, 2, 3. Give you
right.
Yeah,
okay.
You ask a woman, what did you do today? I'm going to tell you about the 5 conversations I had, all about what, my cat's up to, what my friends told me. I'm building that relationship with you through my communication. And so women are much more relational communicators, whereas men are much more instrumental. They're using communication to accomplish tasks. Right?
That's amazing.
It's so frustrating sometimes, right? But it's so amazing when you start to break it down that way. And so, if you're going in, and like I did this multiple times as a university professor, like a room full of men, and especially as a young woman, like going in and communicating to all of these older men, I have to use my report talk a lot more than the relational talk. Like they're not gonna pay that much attention to me, right? Or find me. And I think this is key for all of our business owners out there, or women looking to get promoted in their careers too, is if you want to build that authority and expertise, particularly in male dominated industries, you have to use a lot more report talk and adapt to the audience and what you're speaking.
That is brilliant. I have never heard it summed up quite that way, that it depends on who you're talking to, not even what you're saying as much, right? Of course, we have to know what we're saying if we're going to communicate, but I love that, Megan. And I've always said, because I talk about marketing copy, which I'm sure you work on with your coaches. I mean, when you coach people a little bit, right? Like it's like you're talking to them about speech and how to tell their story. But what that is a form of marketing, right? And what we always say is it doesn't matter what you want to say. It matters what they need to hear. And like that differential is so important when you're trying to help somebody communicate what they do in their business, and helping someone craft a story. I could see why that is so important. I think you've really said something cool here. I always talk about how men, they focus on one thing. Like they really have that ability, and it's very powerful in a lot of instances, to just their ability to just focus and compartmentalize, right? And I always joke, like if you have a husband or a brother who was watching TV and you're like, hey, can you help me with this thing? They're like, but I'm watching TV, and you're like, oh my God, right? But it's like, meanwhile, we're like, yes, could you get that? Yeah, get the kitchen. Hey, did you guys send that email? Yeah, I got that. Did you get the cat? Okay, great, right? It's just different, and we need both. Right. But I love how you just sum that up. Like this is functional, right? This is reporting. And the thing that we do is all about how everything's interconnected and the report. And I just think that's brilliant. I love how you just couched that. Thank you. That was amazing. Guys, you heard it here first. That was awesome, Megan. Thank you.
I mean, the other side of it too is it is a spectrum for like there's task oriented communication and then relationship oriented communication. And so there's actually like a self assessment you can take. It's called DISC, DISC. And if you just Google it, you can pull it up and see like where you fit on the spectrum. Because of course, there's some women that are going to be a lot more task oriented in their communication patterns. But knowing where you fit and then what you're saying about marketing language is so important. Who do you want to work with? Right? Like who's your ideal client and what kind of communication style do they actually prefer? Can you find that like connecting point between you guys? And that's where the genius happens. Like that's when you're marketing gold. And it is what I do a lot as a public speaking coach is helping you connect your stories and your lived experience to your ideal audience.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. So I realized I got so excited about everything you did for the university that I didn't finish that question, which was, so like you just said, you help somebody really tell their story and connect. What does that look like when you're working with someone? Do you work with people until their story is finished? Do you have like a set schedule with them? Like, can you just tell us a little bit about that so our audience understands how you work with people?
Sure. Yeah. And there's two ways. One is my group coaching program that's 3 months and really set up for when you're making some money in your business, but you don't have your business messaging down. And I like to describe that one as putting together that all the speeches you're going to give as a business owner. So there's really 5 of them. It's like an introduction speech, like I did at the top of this interview. You're going to tell that speech hundreds and hundreds of times. You want to make sure that you have it nailed nailed down, ready to go, hitting all of your key points. You're going to tell, and there's a handful of stories that everyone tells too. And one of those is like this client transformation story or your founding story. And so that program's called Soul Speakers Academy. And then I do work with some clients one-on-one as well. And they tend to have very specific public speaking goals in mind. So if you want to give a TED Talk in the next year, there's some different ways we can position you to get you out there and make sure you're on the organizers in your area's radar as like the go-to person for the TED Talk. Or you want to do workshops. I know not everyone's trained in adult learning principles, something I learned a lot about as a college professor, and I love helping you get your material shaped in a way to present it for your audience. And then I do work with a handful of female like tech entrepreneurs that are pitching for investors too. So we're starting to it's one of those things that the universe just brought to me. And I think it comes down to like we were talking about with gendered communication. There's specific things that women have to do a little bit differently, or where we've been socialized so much to be people pleasers, or, we don't want to claim that full credibility and authority. And it really helps us when we seek like high level investments in our businesses, or when it comes to doing sales language too. Like all of those things become tricky. And so that's better one-on-one.
I can picture that. Yeah. It's harder because you got to get a little bit deeper, right? Yeah. Oh my gosh. So cool. My history, I don't know if you know this, I used to help people get funding in tech companies with VC pitching. Isn't that crazy? So the second you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant, because it's so needed. Right? Because people get so nervous. I mean, just like anybody telling their story, you get so nervous and you feel like there's so much on the line and the pressure, right? So I could really see having somebody next to you coaching you through that specific process could be really valuable for people. So those are the structured speeches. Those are the 5 that people need, or the one-on-one work that people need. But how can somebody really learn how to speak off the cuff, right? So whether it's at networking events, which we're not doing right now really, unless it's over Zoom, but like even if somebody calls and it's a spontaneous introduction, or you do find yourself in a Zoom room where you need to talk about stuff, or heaven forbid, we're actually back open all the way here in the United States and we get to go see each other in person. How does somebody speak off the cuff in a way that lands?
Yeah, I love this question because I've been asked to do it so many times in my life and we didn't get there yet. But when I was transitioning out of being a college professor, I decided to join the Peace Corps. So I had this opportunity to go abroad and help another university in Kosovo develop their like media department and their student services. And so I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. And in that meantime, I was helping so many of my friends that wanted to run for office or had books coming out or
Ah,
things, and they'd be like, hey Megan, can you just like listen to this speech really quick, like I know you're a really good speaker, like just give me some tips, that sort of thing. And I was like, eventually someone should be paying me to do this.
yeah, I love when it happens that way, right? When you're like, so many
Yeah,
people keep
it was
asking
like
me for this. Maybe I should
you're
turn this
on
into my
like
job.
the fourth friend of a friend of a friend, and you're like, okay, we need to get this
Excuse me,
figured out.
people. That is so cool that that's how
Yeah,
that happened. I love when it's organic like that. That's awesome.
I love it too. And so when it comes to speaking off the cuff, I didn't realize this was a problem for other people until
You're like, I do it all the time. What?
no, I was like, no, I just wing it. And so what I've done is I've really broken out the three things that I didn't realize I was doing until people have started asking me about it. And the first one is telling that story. So one of the things I do with my clients, and you can do at home, is start to take an inventory of your greatest hits. Remember those really cool CDs that you used to get, all the, Britney's greatest hits or
I do. I miss them. Yes, I do. I remember.
I just pulls it up. But you're like, no, I just want these 5 songs. Anyhow, you can come up with your greatest hit stories. And so one of mine, of course, is transitioning out of being a university professor and into my business. Right. Like, and that one, it's your founder story. It always needs to be part of your greatest hits. You're going to be asked about it time and time again.
Love
That
it.
aha moment, that's another one of those greatest hit stories. And so starting to build that inventory for yourself and you're telling these stories all the time anyways, then you have them ready in your back pocket to be like, oh, someone just asked me a question about the number one problem my clients face. I have this client story that I just share automatically. And I can help you polish them if you're like, my stories tend to be really like long and random.
Then I got toast. And then you're like, no, no, no.
Exactly. It's like, no, like let's get to those key points. So the first
Yeah.
thing is like know what stories you tell and the ones that get like the good response from your audience, and just keep telling those because the people you're talking to haven't heard them before. And even if they have, people like repetition too. Like it's so important for
So
marketing.
true.
Yeah. And then the
Yeah.
second thing is making sure that you've got some sort of structure to your remarks, right? Like I'm doing step by step right now. I can make anything a 3-step process. Like, I just automatically am like, so there's 3 things. There might be 10 things, but I'll put them in 3 categories or something like that. So you could do that one. Another one that works really well is past, present, future. So what was the situation like in the past? What's currently happening with it? And what do you want to see happen in the future?
Yes, that reminds me of like those old commercials, right? It's like the X-Acto knife commercial where it's like it starts in black and white. And they're like, have you ever tried it? And that's the past. Then there's we have this new thing, right? And then there's the new future. Is it like that?
It's exactly like that. Some of those, if you think through like a info commercial, like,
Yes.
oh, wham, pow. That's something called Monroe's motivated sequence. And there's 5 steps to it.
I didn't know there was a name for it.
Yeah. There's nothing new in communication. This is why I love my job so much. I'm like, the structure of the story is never going to change. Like,
That's so cool. There's 5 parts to infomercials.
yeah.
I think you just blew my brain. I really think my brain just in my head just exploded. So can you tell, like, do you know what they are? No, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but that's an amazing piece of information.
I'm like, let me grab my little like notebook on them because I haven't talked about them in a while, but it's like the most classic persuasion situation. One
Got it.
framework that I talk a lot about for especially like service-based entrepreneurs is called CAR. And then we'll talk Monroe's motivated sequence because I know it's fun. But CAR is your challenge, your action, and then your result. So what challenge does someone have? What's one action they can take? And what's the result from taking that action? And so you can plan all of your Facebook Lives using CAR. Like it becomes so quick and you're like, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to do. You have 2 minutes for each part, throw in a little intro and conclusion, and you're set.
Shut the front door. That's amazing. Oh my gosh. Well, okay, if nobody takes anything from this interview, which there's a lot already, please remember that. Like there's a structure to all of this and it doesn't actually change, but it's almost kind of like our courage and our faith in ourselves to do it. Is that, I mean, do you find that with your clients? Like the structure's there, like we can work inside the structure, but then how do you bring yourself to it?
Exactly. The number one, like, biggest surprise thing that happened when I transitioned into public speaking coaching was I was used to teaching all of these structures. And like I said, there's not a lot new in communication. We're following a lot of the same patterns that have been established for 1,000 years. But I had not done anything around mindset coaching. And so the first coach I actually invested in was a mindset coach and business mentor because I had also never sold anything before. And I realized how many mindset issues came up for people with public speaking. And so people come to me and say, Megan, I just don't know what to talk about. Like that will be their presenting problem. And then it's
Right.
like, no, like, okay, actually, you do know what to talk about. And I can tell, you've got your coaching framework, you've got your founder story, you've got this, this, and this. Why aren't you doing it?
Mm-hmm.
That's when all of well, I really care. Like, what if everyone judges me? What if no one watches it? All of these what ifs come up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that's where really the gold is too. And I'm guessing that even inside, like, as you've started to work with people, are there new stories that come out of that alone? Like the what if worries? Does that ever happen?
Yeah, it does. And it's kind of like, an onion with the layers to be all Shrek like. People are like onions, just like ogres, and they have layers. And as you start to peel back those layers, you're going to uncover new stories, and we're constantly learning and evolving. And I really encourage people to be more vulnerable with their audiences and like push themselves towards that vulnerability because self-disclosure is what builds relationships.
Oh, here.
You're keeping everything surface level. You're not building the know, like, and trust factor that moves people to purchasing from you.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I think that's really true. It's interesting. You're hitting us at an interesting time over here at Team Sarah, where I have decided to overhaul things really almost dramatically in the way that we sell and the way that we work with people, because I hate what's happening out there with the superficial. And it's like, no, we come down underneath. And even just sharing that story, we've been blown away by the response. We didn't do it for that, right? It was like, this is happening. Let's be vulnerable. Let's talk about it. And I think you're really hitting something important there, Megan, where it's often where we feel the most nervous, right? Where we feel the most vulnerable, that the real gold really is. How do you help your clients find that?
Ooh.
And I don't mean like, let's like do the whole program right now. I don't mean that. But
no, you're totally fine.
It's
one of those things where I have to build that relationship up with my clients, right?
Yeah.
Like, I was on the call with one of my male, so I work with both women and men, which is fascinating for me because I know there's so many coaches that just work with women and that's
sure.
But I've got quite a few men that have either moved into the coaching space or they're like trying to build these relationship and like rapport muscles. And he was self-disclosing just so much information to me today about going through the divorce with his wife and like how that's impacted everything. And, we're maybe a month and a half in, we've been building this relationship over time. So I can create that safe space where he knows I'm not judging his story and I'm not being, because I do have my PR angle, my lens that I look through and I'm like, that's a really great story. But I like,
sorry, you're in pain. And
so many podcasts if we go this route, but it's being sensitive to like, are you ready to tell that story? And so one of the rules that I have is if you're still very attached and like living in that moment, now's not the time to tell the story.
I love that you said that.
Yeah. And there's like some stories from my life that I don't share where it's like, oh, I know if I say it, like, I'm a big believer in like our mind body connection. And so I can feel my throat just starting to close in on itself. And I know that I'm not ready to share that that particular story yet, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's really important you said that. And I hope everybody listening really lets that sink in, because it is critical that you don't do it to be manipulative or do it because you think it's a great story, but to actually do it from a place of true, authentic sharing. Is that, I mean, do you think that that's right?
That's such a great summary of it. And I would add that it's teaching the audience something. Like, you have to have learned the lesson and be able to transfer it. So I know we're jumping all around and I want to bring us back to Monroe's motivated sequence, but it's also a really great time to talk all about story structure. So I've talked about like your founding story. And so we'll use that as the example, but there's 4 parts to every good story. You've got the normal, like what was happening in your life. So with my founding story, I talk about how I was a college professor going through the day to day. And then there's this transformation, the aha moment where you're like, oh, I want to do something different. Then there's a new normal. Like, how did it work out? And you want the normal and new normal to be more like parallel structured. So if you're talking about your day-to-day life and the normal, talk about that in the new normal, or whatever key points you want to do. And then the 4th part, though, is that wrap up. It's where you transfer that lesson that you learned from your story to your audience. And that's where that money shot is. Like, that's, and when you come up with like what that lesson is, like one thing I talk about a lot is how your speech will change the world. Like, I know the power of sharing these stories and the power of being the role model and the first one to stand up in a community and say, oh, I'm the one that's going to be vulnerable, right? Like, that's going to be so much more important.
It's going to land. Yeah. I mean, that's the word I use. I don't know if that's the word, but it like it's like the audience can hear it. Like you were saying, right? Like it goes, oh, I got it. I've never heard anybody say before, transfer the lesson. And I love that phrase, Megan. I think that's brilliant, because that's kind of the point of telling the story, right? Is to actually transfer the emotion over. But I love the idea of transferring the lesson too. That's beautiful. Very cool. And thank you for sharing the structure. I'm sorry I put you on the spot with that. I didn't mean to do that. It's like mean interviewer. I totally didn't mean to do that to you. You handled it beautifully. Thank you for being so gracious. All right. So Megan, we've now got the structure, right? We did all the structure. We have ourselves vulnerable. We kind of know what the story is going to be. I have a sneaking suspicion that there's one more skill or practice that someone's going to need to put in. Courage, confidence, stamina, maybe. What do you think is the most important next step to put in there?
You're on the right track with the C's. I think conversational, though, is because of course courage and confidence are going to come the more you do it. But what I see people doing a lot is snapping into like presentation mode. Like, and now here I am. I'm going to give this presentation. Exactly. And people want the conversation, right? Like, that's the one thing your audience wants from you along these lines of like, what is authenticity? Because that's like a whole other conversation, is they want you to be you, and they're getting a sneak peek into what a day in your life is like. They want to know you, right? To truly know you. That the best thing to do is to be conversational. So sometimes my clients will be like, but I really like having my teleprompter app. Like, can I keep it in? Of course, if you're recording like a sales promotional video where you want it to be that 45-second, like, you know, snazzy thing.
Like a power hit, right?
Yeah. Or a very, like a Facebook ad. But even the Facebook ads, I don't do that much with Facebook ads. But the ones that I see that perform really well for my clients are the conversational ones as well.
No, that makes sense. It's so interesting you say this. I was just in somebody invited me to a networking group just the other morning. And I was like, sure, I'll try it out. I'm always up for meeting more people. That's wonderful. And they had 30 seconds to say their elevator pitch as they went around the Zoom room, right? And you could tell, I help people do, and I was like, wow. And that wasn't to pick on them. Like, I get it. People get super scared, right? And I'm sure you see that all the time, Megan. Like, and I don't mean to be picky at all, but it really was shocking to me, the difference I felt between people who were just like, hey guys, I'm so happy to be here. This is what I do. Here's who I help. This is why I started it. And here's who I'm looking for. Like, it was like night and day. And I'm sure you run into this all the time, but it reminded me, did you ever see Despicable Me? Mm-hmm. Okay. Remember when the little girl has to do a presentation at school and she's talking, she's fine. And then all of a sudden she goes, My mother is better than all that. Right. And it's like, so we laugh, but that's what you're talking about, isn't it?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. And it is where practice becomes so important because, and I think that's the value in those networking groups beyond expanding your network. But if you need that practice, and I actually host a Toastmasters alternative now too. So Toastmasters, if you're not familiar with it already, it's a local, like speech practice and presentation skills place to go, and they've got clubs all over the world. They've been around for 100 years, and they're trying to adapt online because of COVID, but they're much more masculine in what they teach and traditional in presentation skills. And so it doesn't always translate, particularly for either like service-based entrepreneurs or online entrepreneurs. And then a lot of the folks that I work with, I'll add on, are even soul-led entrepreneurs. So we might be into our oil, like our essential oils, have our crystals going. Maybe you want to start a speech off with like an oracle deck read. Whatever your thing might be, Toastmasters isn't set up for that.
That's not going to work there. Yeah. Okay.
So I have something called 777 Club that is my Toastmasters alternative. There's never more than 7 people on the call, and you can practice your speech and get feedback from everyone else on the call and myself. So
oh my gosh, that's amazing.
It's my favorite thing. I came up with it in the middle of quarantine, and I was just like, yeah, this is what I needed. So all of my one-on-one clients and my group coaching clients have unlimited access to come and practice.
That's genius. See, this is what I'm talking about, you guys. Are women amazing? Like, oh my gosh, you like saw a need and you filled it. I love it. That's like, oh my gosh, makes all my juices get all excited. That is amazing.
Well, it's actually like a good coaching lesson too, is so many people will say, and I mean, I think the advice is right to like start with your one offer and scale it. But I knew that this like was a missing ingredient to my offer. There's one thing practicing one-on-one, you and I, but it's so different when you add in that audience component. And you don't want the first time you're testing out new material to be when the stakes are really high.
Absolutely. Well, but I think it's also, Megan, it's not, by the way, like all the things you just said about what this new edition is for people, like the practice it gives them, the depth it gives them. But you also did something really cool, which is you watched the world change and you created an offer to match it. And that, to me, that's when we always know we've like hit upon a killer entrepreneur, is someone who can see what's happening and adapt. And so it's not always about the one offer and then build, right? It's about what does the world need and can I offer it? And you nailed it. I love that. I'm sorry. I get excited when people kill it in their businesses.
I'm so excited about it too, because I know part of like transitioning. So I've been in my business full time since March. So almost a full year. And it was one of those where you have to just start to trust yourself. And like, it was me taking that big leap and being like, no, like it was a lot of behind the scenes structuring it. Like for anyone who does logistics can tell you, like trying to coordinate getting even 7 people on a call at the same time, but I didn't want to deal with any of the tech stuff. So I use a whole different, it's basically I'm repurposing technology for yoga studios and to making it happen for 777 Club. So I don't have to worry about, like, if Sarah doesn't want to come Monday at 10 a.m. and would rather come Thursday, I don't have to worry about it.
That's amazing. Yeah. Wow. I mean, you literally just made this work. Like, you're like, I see a thing, this is working. It's just happening.
Exactly. And having that self-trust that like, that's going to be it. And, you know, you get there by taking those micro steps. And we've been talking a lot about confidence and courage. And it's one of the things people ask me about all the time too. So I'd love to share like my favorite practice.
Yeah, let's go. Do it for sure.
So Danielle Lepore has this whole book about core desired feelings. And for me, that is my one morning practice that I stick to and I'm like the most consistent about.
Awesome.
So you haven't heard about it before. What you do is you pick the 3 to 5 emotions you want to feel on a daily basis. So for me, it's like, I love like the feeling of at peace. Like that is my number one priority in life, is I just want things to be peaceful. The second one is I love things to be delicious. Like,
yes, I love that.
That feeling of just like straight deliciousness. And so some days, well, let me walk you through them. And then the third one is wild. Like I love like the freedom of being an online entrepreneur. I love like the adventure of everything. And so if I don't get to do something like wild every day, after a while, I'm really bored. So those are like my top three.
Love
But
that.
if you're working on confidence,
Yeah.
make sure you write down confidence. And so what you do is you pick one micro action every day that's going to help you have that emotional experience that you want. So it might be today I'll feel confident by, and then you think, okay, well, what's something I could do? I'll feel confident by going live. Maybe that's your big thing. I'll feel confident by speaking my mind in this meeting for my job, or I'll feel confident by standing up to my mom, or
Yes.
whatever that experience it is, because the thoughts that we think influence the actions that we take and the emotions, and I can draw us the mindset map.
Yeah, I know, right? And then the actions dictate the results, right? And so it all comes from that. Yeah.
And our results, like the part that I think people sometimes miss out on too, is like those experiences then reinforce our thoughts and our
Love it.
right. So it's all one big cycle, and you can do it wherever you want. If you're more of like, oh, I want to change my thoughts person, cool. For me, that didn't work as well. I was like, oh, I need to have that action piece. Like, I need to know, okay, if I take this action, it's going to produce this experience that will make me think this thought. And that's where I enter into the circle.
Love it. I love that. Megan, I've been studying mindset shifts and work since forever. And I've never heard anybody talk about reinforcing, right, the experience. I talk about it in a very different way, but I love how you just summed that up. I think it's really important that we understand that actually the experiences we create through those beliefs reinforce the beliefs, and that is a full circle experience. And a lot of us, including myself, we talk about it like if you want different results, you have to start with different thoughts, then beliefs, then actions. But I love that we have to recognize there might be some habits or some loops to break up as we do that. That was really great. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was awesome.
Welcome. How it relates to public speaking, just to tie it full circle.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that we're celebrating our successes. So if you've gone live, if you've had a client call, if you've done anything that stretched yourself outside of your comfort zone, or even something you've done 100 times, still celebrate it, particularly when it comes to public speaking. So I see my clients sit there and think after they go live, oh, that sucked. No one watched it. I was boring. Like, you just spiral down into these negative thoughts. And what if instead you put on I Love Lizzo, like feeling good as hell. You put on Good as Hell and you dance around your room and you tell yourself, no, I did awesome. I am getting better and better at speaking. Every time I go live, I reach a new person. And you have that reinforcing, like, yeah, celebration. And that's going to make it so much easier the next time you need to go live. Going live is something I speak a lot about with my clients because it's just so intimidating.
Yeah.
In other speaking settings too.
Yeah, I don't know what that is, but I found the same thing. It really seems to be one of those things where people get really nervous. So I love that idea. You guys, you heard that, right? Whenever you're speaking or right after you're done speaking, don't pick it apart. Celebrate. Beautiful. Love it. And that also, by the way, reinforces the new positive thoughts, right? Brilliant. I love it. I love it. Well, Megan, I believe you have something pretty cool for our listeners today. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
I would love to invite your audience to join my Unlock Your Core Message Challenge. It is all about finding that unique, special part of yourself. So I shared earlier, my core message is your speech will change the world. And what's so cool about when you know your core message, like, and I'll give the other example too, like Marie Forleo's is everything is figure outable.
Yeah.
Or Gabby Bernstein, become the happiest person you know. All of us have inside of us one driving, like, kind of sentence, something that is a little scary to us, makes the little hairs on our arms stand up. We're like, yeah, that's it. And when you know your core message and then all of these audience's expectations that we've been talking about, you're truly able to meet your audience in that middle spot. And that's where all of the messaging for your business comes from and becomes so much easier. But what happens a lot of times is people lose themselves. They do all of like the shape shifting to fit who they think their ideal audience members are.
Yes.
Sarah, I see you nodding along up there. Yeah. And so you have to get crystal clear on who you are and what your core message is first. And then you can start to think about, how do I meet my audience where they're at and not lose yourself in all of it. So the Unlock Your Core Message Challenge walks you through step by step how to find that.
Love it.
You and your business.
Oh my gosh, Megan, that's an extraordinary gift. Thank you so much, you guys. The links are either under this video if you're watching, or they're in the show notes if you're listening. I want to make sure that you guys get that and you get access to that, because I think that's really, really important. And those of you that have been listening and watching us over here at Team Sarah know we're really serious about causing this transformation for people. Like, don't try to shove yourself into what everybody else is doing. And we have Megan here to help you do that, which is amazing. Well, Megan, it has been so much fun to have you on the podcast today. I just so appreciate your time and your energy and what you do for other people. So thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.